Welcome back to another edition of the Knight Report podcast. I'm your host, Mike Broadbent. Joining me once again is my co-host, Richie Schneiderite. Rich, it's another day of good news, bad news. Good news is Rutgers has a commitment in the transfer portal, their fourth transfer portal commitment, this time from a long snapper. This is a long snapper coming in from BYU. His name's escaping me for some reason at the moment. Austin Riggs, yep. He is originally from Idaho. He ended up at BYU. Bad news is we lost our linebackers coach today in Corey Hetherman. Corey Hetherman is moving on to become the defensive coordinator at the University of Minnesota. So Minnesota and Rutgers continue to have this weird, connected at the hip or flip-flopping. This Hetherman apparently was the player to be named later in this series of trades they've done. So let's just talk about that first. It's never a bad thing when programs are elevating your assistants, especially programs that are, comparable to you. So it shouldn't be seen as a bad thing, but Hetherman is a great coach. We've talked about how good the linebackers have been under him and how much development we've seen from guys like Moture going from, a guy really without a position as this hybrid edge rusher linebacker guy to a really good, off-ball stand-up linebacker. Tyreen Powell developed from, just a very raw athlete to one of the best linebackers in the Big Ten. And Deion Jennings, that he squeezed every ounce of talent out of that guy. So just talk about what Rutgers is losing in Hetherman, because I think it is a big blow, but it's also a good thing, like I said, because you'll be able to attract better candidates in the future, selling that they could have upward mobility at Rutgers.
Yeah, for sure. He was a great coach. I thought he really did a lot with a linebacker unit that in 2022 specifically, that had 7 career starts going into that season. You lost Mohamed Toure to an ACL. You lost Moses Walker to an ACL. And honestly, there was a big question marks about that unit. There was only 3 healthy scholarship players at linebacker going into 2022. And he made the best of it, too. He turned, like you said, Tyreen Powell is now a certified NFL draft prospect. I think he probably could have left this year. He had such a good year. Obviously, the injury he suffered kind of played a little factor in that. But he's coming back huge. Deion Jennings is now a legitimate NFL prospect. If you asked me 2 years ago, is Deion Jennings going to make the NFL? I probably would have laughed at you. Now I'm looking and I'm like, this guy actually has a legitimate shot. He had a hell of a year, back-to-back years, I should say, in a role where I really didn't think he'd be that successful. He came in as a DB and he turned him into a legitimate linebacker. His 2 best years where he was back-to-back, all Big Ten honorable mention. And then Mohamed Toure, who was an edge rusher in 2021, missed 2022, kind of didn't really he had a weird role going into the season. He filled in for when Tyreen Powell went down, very almost perfect kind of. He played great as a linebacker. He still played some edge rusher at times, but he was a semifinalist for the comeback player of the year and all Big Ten fourth team for Phil Steele. So I mean, this unit was completely turned around with him. And it went from a unit that was probably near the bottom of the team, probably the bottom of the defense, honestly, to arguably the top of the defense. That was such a good unit over the past 2 seasons.
Yeah, it really did turn a pretty big weakness to a pretty big strength on the team. Yeah. And like you said, it was so commendable to be able to produce at such a high level with so little to work with last year. And then this year, the unit took even bigger jump, having 3 really good linebackers and some young guys behind him. Where do you think Rutgers goes now? Obviously, they've got possibly 2 positions open on the defensive staff now because we're not really sure if Marquise Watson will be able to return. How do you see this defensive staff coming together now that Hetherman is left?
That's where it's going to get really interesting because just looking at linebacker stuff alone, like you have a lot of guys on staff currently that have linebacker experience, coaching experience specifically. Charlie Noonan is the one I'm keeping a really close eye on because he's already been on the road recruiting. He was kind of filling in while they had like an open spot for that one recruiting role with Marquise not being there. And Pat Flaherty doesn't really go on the road recruiting that much, so they kind of had 2 open spots. So they're kind of just rotating in guys here and there. We saw Scott Malone on the road, kind of filling in as that O-line recruiter. We saw Charlie Noonan on the road, kind of filling in as just a defensive recruiter in general. He's got some really good ties to that New England area, so it's not too crazy to throw his name out there. He was already working with the linebackers as a quality control coach, so he knows the room. He's been very familiar with it. He's been with Rutgers since 2000 or 2020 when Greg Schiano came back, and he's a Scarlet Knight too. So it makes a lot of sense from that standpoint. And his 1 year as linebackers coach at Liberty in 2019, he had a second team All American and a first team All Patriot League guy in Keith Wotzel, if I pronounced that correctly. The kid had 118 tackles, 12 sacks, and 17 and a half tackles for loss. So like he knows what he's doing. Obviously a different level, but he's been here long enough that I think you could be comfortable promoting him. Another guy that's on staff currently that would be a really good in-house hire would be and I'm going to pronounce this wrong because I don't know how to pronounce his last name, but Jarrett Keith, I don't know. Kite, it might even be Kite, Kyte maybe. Was Rutgers interim D-line coach, but he was a quality control coach prior to. I shouldn't even say prior to. He actually joined the staff and then immediately got like pretty much promoted to interim D-line coach. Filling in for Marquise Watson. He's worked with Harris Simiak before. He worked at Rutgers before in 2015 as a QC, linebackers QC under Kyle Flood. He spent 2016 to 2022 at Maine between doing linebackers, outside linebackers, special teams, safeties, defensive coordinator for a year or two. And he's been with Harris Simiak forever now. The two went to Springfield, or coached at Springfield together back in, 2013, 2014, something like that. And he's already been promoted kind of to like in that interim role at D-line coach. So it would kind of make sense maybe, and you actually speculated this before we started recording, but put him at linebackers coach and then go find a defensive line coach because there's a lot of big name defensive line coaches out there. But those would be the two in-house hires I'm looking at. And then my favorite on our list, at least currently, is Tem Lukabu. That's how it's pronounced. I actually looked that one up and I still got it wrong. He's the Carolina Panthers outside linebackers coach. Spent time at Rutgers from 06 to 07 as director of player development. 2010 to 2011 as outside linebackers coach. Went with Greg to Tampa Bay as a defensive assistant for 2 years. Proceeded to go back to college. Went to Colgate, Florida International, San Francisco 49ers QC. Spent time in the SEC with Mississippi State as linebackers coach. The linebackers coach of Cincinnati Bengals. Boston College defensive coordinator for 3 years. Like, stop me when I think this is enough experience because this would be the home run hire of the group, in my opinion. That's a lot. That was a mouthful.
Yeah, no, he's a guy who obviously Rutgers had on staff in the past under Craig, so it would make sense. And I can't imagine he's going to be kept on by whoever the new staff ends up being in Carolina, so he will be without a job. So if he wants to, I know a lot of coaches, when they eventually make the jump from college to the pros, they tend to stick there, and you can look at somebody like Anthony Campanelli for that. Like, he was rumored to be the Rutgers DC. Same thing with Michigan. Then he ends
up listing him too.
Yeah, then he ends up becoming the Miami DC, and he hasn't ever, I haven't heard his name speculated since. You look at a guy like Darren Rizzi, who was a longtime coordinator under Schiano. He's been in the NFL now for 20 years. Guys tend to just kind of enjoy that life more because while it is a grind in season, you actually do have some time in the off season to kind of regather yourself. Whereas in college, it's all about recruiting. You're moving right from the season to spring practice, and there's just a lot more of a time commitment in college than the NFL, year round at least.
Like, I mean, linebackers like Campanelli, like he's the linebackers coach for Miami. I thought about him, but I'm like, no. Rizzi, like you said, loves the NFL. He's good at what he does. Phil Gaiano is another guy who he's coached every position basically in college football. These guys get to the NFL, and him specifically, I could speak from knowing for a fact they love it there. They just don't want to go back. No one wants to recruit, to be honest. It is and now with the portal and everything, it's just more than a day job. It's like a 365, 24/7 a year job. Like, it's just a pain in the ass, to be honest.
Yeah, no, it's and you have to recruit your own team constantly too with the portal as well. So it's not getting any easier for these colleges by any means. So are you hearing anything else regarding the staff? Or I know it just happened a couple hours ago. So
no, nothing at the moment. They're going to take their time with this one. It seems like it's a weird period right now where you kind of don't really need anyone on staff. You can wait until like later in the month when.
Well, that's true and it's not true. Like the transfer portal. We have about probably a week left. I know that Rutgers classes start in about a week for the spring semester, but I know that we were looking, and I know that there's probably also ways for the staff to get around these dates, but I think the last day to add classes is the 24th. So you're really kind of closing in on the the end of the line for adding transfers for the spring.
Well, let me rephrase that, I guess, a little bit, because even if they do put Jarrett Kite to linebackers coach and you have an opening at D-line coach, I don't really think they're going to add either position via the portal. I think they're done at D-line now that they got their tackle. And I don't see them adding a linebacker because their linebacker group's all returning pretty much. So it's a pretty damn good group still. You don't really need one. So I don't think there's any rush, I should say, for a linebackers coach currently. They're not going to host high school kids until the end of the month on the 28th when they have their junior day. So you really don't need anyone until then specifically. But I think between that and the AFCA coaches convention currently going on from the 7th to the 10th, I think you do some interviews, you reach out, see what the interest is. Because maybe you might even have guys probably reaching out saying like, hey, like, is that D-line spot open? Hey, if that's open, or I could coach linebackers too. Like I could do that. And I'm sure the interest is going to be through the roof because this is not just a Big Ten program. It's a Big Ten program that has proven they're going to pay. And they're proving that they can get you to the next level as well, especially on defense.
Yeah, for sure. And yeah, like you said, that the AFCA coaching convention is always huge for all coaches of all levels, and that's currently ongoing. So there's a reason why this announcement came today, because he probably interviewed either yesterday or today for the job.
Yeah.
So let's move on. We got a commitment from a long snapper. You might remember last year we took a scholarship long snapper in Jake Eldridge, who was supposed to be the #1 high school rated long snapper. I don't really know how they really judge that, but that's what he was ranked as. The year before that, we took, I forget what his name is, Billy Taylor's brother, high school.
Zach Taylor.
Zach Taylor, the scholarship long snapper out of high school. Neither of those guys seemingly are working out because you don't tend to take a scholarship long snapper 3 years in a row, but here we are.
Yep.
So Austin Riggs, 1 year of eligibility left. He's an older kid, 6'4", 230. He was the long snapper for BYU, I believe, the last 4 years. Yep. He took a mission as well. He goes to BYU, so most people who go there are Mormon, so that's typically what we do. So he is an older guy. Talk about how this kind of came together, because this seemed a little bit out of left field.
So they literally just started looking into the portal for long snappers, and it kind of just came together rather quickly. They found a guy that has 40 games played, or 40 games snapped, games played, I guess we could say played. And he was pretty good at it. Eddie Allen is the official special teams coordinator for Rutgers. I say that because they don't have one as one of the 10 staff members that could travel, but he's the guy that's in charge. He's he was UConn special teams coordinator. He was with Greg at Tampa, blah, blah, blah. He was at Rutgers previously. He just kind of identified him, and it kind of just went pretty quickly from there. I can't imagine there's a ton of long snappers in the portal. Maybe there is. Maybe I don't know about them. But it's an interesting kid for the sole fact that not just he's never been on the East Coast because he's from Idaho. He went to BYU. His dad went to BYU. His brother's at BYU. His brother's supposed to be the new long snapper for them. It's just interesting that like he's just making this complete like journey to go to Rutgers. But I mean, they've proven that they're pretty good at long snappers. Well, hit or miss, I guess, at long snappers, because Billy Taylor was getting NFL tryouts and stuff and rookie mini camps and all that stuff. But yeah, I mean, I guess the kid's pretty good. I mean, he recovered a fumble, setting up BYU's touchdown win against Cincinnati this past year. I think it was his first career fumble. And if you watch the team last year, some of these snaps were just brutal. Like Patel's first field goal attempt, I think he missed it against Northwestern. If you watch the snap, you see how low it was. Like it's bad. Like there's a lot of dribblers. And shout out to the holder, because I don't even know who it was. I think it was Michael. No, was it O'Connor? I think it was O'Connor. But whoever the holder was, man, give that guy credit, because you gotta handle these. These are some hard snaps, and a lot of ground balls. Like it's not a good sign when you, like you said, having 3 scholarship long snappers in 3 years. So, but good addition, and they're going to try to help fix the special teams.
Yeah, and it just kind of goes along with the theme of the offseason, where it seems like Greg has made it a point that anywhere that he's not satisfied with, they're going to bring in competition.
Yeah.
So whether that be, the quarterback position, the long snapper position, defensive tackle, they're not done either. Where do you see them going? I know we talked about this in the Malcolm Ray podcast, but where do you see them like honing in on targets the rest of the way?
Tight end. It's a clear need. Everyone knows it. I think fans, media, the coaching staff clearly knows it because they're following a million different tight ends in the portal.
Yeah, that was surprising. For those of you who don't follow the portal thread, they've recently started following about a dozen new tight ends. Like it's like all tight ends basically, tight ends and offensive linemen.
Yeah, no, they need a tight end bad. But I forgot to fix that. I'm just looking at something now. But yeah, no, tight end is the big need right now. Offensive line, they want a guard. They want a guard really bad. They also want a tackle. I don't know if they're going to get both. I think guard's the bigger priority at the moment. Because you do have Needham returning, who was solid until he got hurt. Just serviceable. We saw Taj White get some serviceable snaps as well last season, so you hope one of these guys develops a tackle. We've seen Dante Chin play some tackle in the past. I'm trying to think who else. I'm missing someone. What's Dominic Rivera?
Taj White,
Dominic Rivera, Tyler Needham. So you have some dudes there that could play tackle next year if need be, but I think it's also tough because the O-line's always going to be overpaid. Like we said it last year, there was a average G5 guy that got paid, like Rutgers reached out, got paid $600K. And it's like, all right, well, let's see ya. Willie Tyler got paid like 3 times somehow. I don't know how, but like,
God bless him. Yeah.
So
he ended up in his best situation of his career in his final season. So
yeah, in the shitty ACC. So
yeah, well, they made it to a conference championship and he was the starter. He had that one viral clip of him, doing jumping jacks on the field. The one play, remember that?
Yeah, forgot about that
as a distraction.
Yeah, definitely interesting to say the least. But yeah, I mean those are the 2, or I should say 3 if you count the other offensive line position. But it's going to be tight end and offensive line, and that's pretty much it. I mean, I think you can look in the portal and peek and see like, hey, like, is there like another defensive tackle that wants to come on board? Like, I think you look at the very least. Yeah. But I do think they're done there for the most part. Defensive end, they're pretty much done. Minus, I forgot cornerback. I would probably look into a cornerback. Because you do have Bo Mascow is probably going to be cornerback 3 next year. But I'd also, if I'm Rutgers personally, I prefer a veteran presence back there, someone that I could just throw in for some serious snaps here and there. Or like, what if Rodgers gets toasted one game and it's like, oh, shit, like you're going to throw Bo Mascow, a second-year freshman out there? Risky, right, but I mean, yeah. So I would probably just try to get some more depth at corner. So tight end, offensive line, cornerback. Probably those are probably 4 priorities right now.
So do you see them taking visitors this upcoming weekend, and we'll kind of know who they are in the near term?
I think they definitely will. I think it'd be a little insane not to host any portal visitors. I think we'll definitely see a tight end on campus. That is their major priority right now. I think they're definitely pushing for linemen. I just think those guys are a little bit harder to land. Like I said before, these guys are getting paid shit tons of money for just being average, being mid. Like that's it. Like, so we'll see.
All right, well, that's all we got. I want to thank you all for listening once again. Rich, you got anything else you wanted to hit on before we head out?
2 things. Number 1, BYU's roster doesn't list long snappers. They list them as deep snappers. I don't like that. That's just weird and kind of cringy. So I kind of hope they get that fixed or something. It's weird. Very odd. Number 2, Indiana tomorrow night. Stay safe because it's supposed to be some really bad flooding. I think they already declared a state of emergency for tomorrow. It sounds like there's some speculation based on people I know in the area that work there that they're getting warnings about the river overflowing and whatever, cresting or whatever the fuck they call it. So, yeah, definitely if you're going to go to that game tomorrow, it's definitely going to be interesting to see what happens in terms of the weather. But, let's see if Rutgers basketball can bounce back because it has been a rough week, 10 days, whatever it was. So, yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, stay safe out there. Be a bummer if the crowd wasn't great for tomorrow night's game, given that, I'll say it at this point. It's a rivalry game. Rutgers and Indiana are rivals on the hard court, the hardwood at least. So excited about that game, and Rutgers really needs it to break out of this slump, and Indiana needs it just as bad. So two desperate teams will be matching up tomorrow at Jersey Mike's, and hopefully Rutgers is able to pull out the dub.
Got one more thing, because someone asked me on the boards already. The portal's closed, so anyone that's like worrying about if they're gonna like transfer to Minnesota, because that's what someone asked me, they're not transferring currently. Number one, number two, I don't think Rutgers is losing any sleep over anyone going to Minnesota. Everyone's loyal to Rutgers. Just put it like that.
Gotcha. Yeah, that's good to know. It's reassuring. I'm sure we'll have another pod this week to go over the Indiana game, and I'm sure that there'll be more recruiting news. Yeah, I hope so too. But stay tuned to your podcast feed. Stay tuned to the boards. I want to thank you all again for listening. This has been another edition of the Net Report Podcast. Signing off.